When we think of dangerous places, most of us picture dark alleyways, abandoned neighborhoods, or some run-down house in the middle of the woods. But sometimes, the thing that scares you most doesn't come from somewhere unfamiliar. It hides in things that seem completely harmless: a quiet yard sale, a simple family outing to check out some land, or a camping trip with your closest friends. In today's video, you'll hear 3 chilling stories told by 3 ordinary people on 3 seemingly uneventful days. But they all share one disturbing thing in common after that day. They never saw the world the same way again. Put your headphones on, turn off the lights, and get ready to step into the darkness, where you won't always find your way back. Story 1. The Last Yard Sale. I know, this story might sound far-fetched. Every time I tell it, my friends laugh and say I probably imagined the whole thing. But I swear, on everything I have, this really happened. I've always loved thrifting. On lazy summer days, I'd drive around the suburbs looking for random yard sales. It wasn't just about shopping. It was the thrill of stumbling upon something forgotten by someone else, like finding a little time capsule. That day the weather was beautiful. I'd driven pretty far from the city, drifting deeper into the quiet countryside. When I passed a dirt road, I saw an old wooden sign, hand-painted "Yard Sale, God's Haven." Next to it was a large stone slab carved with religious symbols. I don't remember the exact words, but it gave me an odd, uneasy feeling. Curiosity won. I turned onto the narrow dirt path winding through thick trees. At the end of the road was a lovely white house sitting in the middle of a clearing. On the lawn were long tables covered in clothes, toys, fabric. It looked like some kind of church gathering. But what made me freeze was every single person there was dressed exactly the same. Grey jumpsuits. At least 30 people, all ages, quietly walking the area like they were working for the same place. I stepped out of my car. An older woman sitting behind a makeshift cashier table smiled and called me over. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes... there was something strange in them, like she was hiding something behind that overly kind face. We exchanged a few polite words, and just as I was about to leave, she said, "Would you like to come inside? We live here. This is the last family you'll ever need." I gave her a nervous smile, taking half a step back. Goosebumps prickled across my skin. But before I could respond, she turned her head and gave a small nod. 3 men in grey jumpsuits left their table and started walking toward me. I heard one of them whisper softly, "Don't let her leave." The woman suddenly grabbed my wrist gently but firmly and said, "Come on in just for a moment. It's peaceful here, and no one will ever find you if you don't want them to." I froze. My hands started to shake. They were surrounding me calmly but deliberately, like they'd done this before. Just as I felt panic rising in my throat, a deep male voice rang out. "Excuse me, Mom. She's with me. We have somewhere to be." An old man in a faded shirt stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. His tone was firm, his eyes sharp. The 3 men hesitated. The woman gave a thin smile, sighed, and whispered, "It's okay. We'll see you again." The man and I quickly walked back to my car. With every step, I could feel dozens of eyes burning into my back. I turned to look, and just as I feared every person in a jumpsuit had stopped, they stood perfectly still, staring straight at me. No one moved. I fumbled and dropped my keys. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't fit them into the ignition. My tyres slipped into the edge of the gravel ditch. The old man calmly said, "It's all right. Take a breath. Switch to four-wheel drive. I'll guide you." I'd never used 4WD before, but he walked me through it step by step. Finally, the engine roared and the car pulled itself out of the ditch. Before I hit the gas, he looked at me and said, "You're lucky. Not everyone makes it out of here." I drove like hell back to the main road, never once looking back. A few weeks later I tried to return, but the stone was gone. The dirt road didn't exist. There was no White House, no signs of any yard sale. Just a dense, silent forest, cold and untouched, like no one had ever been there. I don't know if it was a cult, a religious commune, or something even darker, but I know one thing for sure. I escaped, and I'm never going back. Story 2. The Red Shack. I used to think that trip would just be another boring property tour with my family, but it became a memory I can't forget, and one I never want to talk about again. I was about 12 when my uncle, an avid hunter, said he wanted to buy a plot of forest land somewhere near Red Oak, Oklahoma. My parents decided to tag along just for a change of scenery. The drive was about 3 hours, but none of us minded. Everyone thought it to be a light-hearted day trip. That was our first big mistake. As soon as we left the paved road and turned onto the dirt path leading to the land, everything got eerily quiet. There wasn't a single person in sight. No power lines, no houses. Just trees, brush, and dry wind howling through dead timber. I remember my mom started looking uneasy. She kept glancing behind us, murmuring under her breath, like she thought someone was following. I'll never forget when she grabbed my hand and whispered, "Something's not right here." My uncle laughed it off, saying remote places were always quiet, and that it's normal to get the creeps out in the woods. But no one kept laughing for long. Once we all got out and started walking deeper into the property, we came across something strange, a small red wooden shack tucked away between the trees, not shown on the map or in the listing. It was no bigger than a tool shed, but it was fully intact. The door wasn't locked, and inside was what kept me awake for nights after. On the dirty floor was a torn, stained blanket covered in dark, reddish-brown splotches. Scattered around were opened food cans, some still half full. But worst of all was the smell. Rot mold and something that resembled raw meat left out too long. And then, the thing that chilled me the most, scratched across the wooden wall in some kind of dark red substance, "I'm still here." No one said a word for several seconds. Then my dad quietly said, "Back to the car. Now." The problem was, we'd gotten turned around while wandering. Everyone argued over which direction we came from. GPS didn't work. No one was certain. The longer we walked, the heavier the air felt. No one spoke anymore, just the sound of crunching twigs underfoot and dry wind brushing the leaves. It took nearly an hour, but we finally found a stretch of pavement. The only problem, it wasn't where we had parked. We started walking along the road, hoping to find our SUV. And that's when we saw it, and froze. Right in the middle of the road was the smouldering body of a deer. Its belly had been sliced open from bottom to top, intestines spilling out, and the fire still faintly burning. There were no signs of a brush fire, no people nearby, and when we passed this road that morning, it was empty. No one said a word. My mum quietly cried. We practically ran the rest of the way. When we finally reached the car, my dad stopped in his tracks. There was a long scratch, an impossibly long one, running from the hood all the way to the rear of the SUV. It didn't look like an animal claw mark. Too straight, too deep, too deliberate. But the worst part, on the inside of the windshield there was a small muddy handprint, pressed clearly from the inside. We didn't say anything else. My dad got in and drove off without checking a thing. My uncle, who was so eager to buy the land, just quietly folded the map. Years later, I stumbled across a documentary about a missing family, the Jamesons, who vanished while looking at property in that very area. Their bodies weren't found for years. There were rumours about a cult living off-grid performing bizarre rituals, burned cats, and things the news never reported. I'm not sure what or who we encountered that day, but I know one thing. We stepped into something's territory, and it didn't want us coming back. Story 3. The Tree People. I used to laugh at those so-called legends, stories about tree people, forest spirits. Things my indigenous friends would whisper about. I never believed any of it, until that weekend, when I came face to face with something I still can't explain. It was me, my girlfriend Ashley, and 4 of our close friends. We decided to go camping in a remote forest up north in Alberta. We'd been there before it was quiet, undisturbed. Eric and I brought our handguns like always. Not because we were scared, but because we were gun guys, and deep woods are never 100% safe. We arrived late just as the sun was setting, so we had to pitch our tents in the fading light. The fire crackled, bugs hummed, and everything seemed fine. Ashley and I set up our tent a bit farther from the others for some privacy. I remember sitting there watching the firelight dance across the trees. My friend's shadows moved along the trunks, flickering like puppets. But then Ashley froze. She turned to me and whispered, "I just saw something run between the trees, really fast." I looked in the direction she pointed. Nothing. I tried to reassure her, but part of me felt it too, that creeping sense that something was watching us, just out of sight. About 30 minutes later, I remembered I'd left my lucky cap in the car, which was parked about 300 meters away, near a small lakeside lot. Eric offered to come with me, since he wanted to check his gear anyway. Instead of taking the long loop back on the trail, which would have taken 45 minutes, we chose a shortcut through the forest. I gave Mike a walkie-talkie and told him to stay in touch. Then we left. The forest felt completely different, dark, damp, and unnervingly quiet. We hadn't gone far when we heard footsteps to our left. We stopped, listened. 1 minute of silence. Then a noise again. This time on the right, and with it, a whisper, faint, barely there, like wind slipping through wood. "Keep walking. They're waiting." I placed a hand on Eric's back and whispered, "Run." We crashed through the underbrush, flashlights shaking in our hands. When we reached the lot, we pressed our backs to my car and drew our guns, aiming into the darkness. No one followed us, but I knew we weren't alone out there anymore. I swept my flashlight across the trees and grabbed my hat and some supplies from the car. Eric whispered, "Dude, I swear someone's hunting us." Not joking. After a quick conversation, we agreed to head back to camp. I radioed Mike and warned him no pranks, or someone might get shot by mistake. As we stepped into the woods again, my right hand gripped my gun. And for the first time in my life, I truly believed I might have to use it. We had barely stepped off the path when a deep, unified chant echoed through the trees. Not singing, but more like some low, guttural mantra rising from the ground. When we reached camp, everyone was already on their feet, all staring north, to the tree line, where dozens, maybe hundreds of figures were emerging. They wore ghillie suits made of dead moss and branches caked in dirt. Their faces were hidden behind wooden masks. They moved in silence, perfectly aligned, slowly closing in around the camp. I fired a warning shot into the ground. They froze. Then a second shot rang out, this one from deep in the forest. It hit the dirt inches from Eric's foot. "Sniper," he whispered. That was it. This wasn't a joke. Someone was aiming at us. From the dark. I shouted, "We're leaving. Don't shoot." We scrambled to pack our gear, tossing it into the back of Eric's truck. As the engine roared to life, the headlights lit them up. Dozens of figures unmoving, just standing there, a few feet from the bumper, watching. No reaction, no words. Eric didn't speak. He drove forward slowly, never speeding up until we had cleared their line. I looked back one last time through the rear window and saw them standing by our fire pit, unmoving, still watching. Not a single one of them blinked. We reported it to the police. They took our statements. Then, nothing. No arrests, no explanations, no investigation. I believe if we hadn't kept our cool that night, you'd be hearing this story from a detective, not a survivor. We always think we're the ones in control of the journey. We turn on the GPS pack, flashlights, food, even weapons if we have to. But sometimes you realize you're not the only one in the woods. And the worst part isn't being attacked. It's being left alive to remember to carry the fear and maybe to warn others. If you've ever seen something strange, something you can't explain, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment, because someone else out there might have seen the same thing. And if you found this video unsettling, just know there are far worse stories still waiting. Thanks for listening, and be careful when you step into the forest. Not every path leads you back.